Welcome to Concord Art. My name is David Duddy, and I was invited to curate a ceramics exhibition, Clay Has Its Say, Narrative Ceramics. I'm delighted to present the work of these 15 artists to the Concord art community and beyond. Although Concord may not be known for showing ceramics and three-dimensional objects, it certainly is in continuation of presenting the very best of contemporary artists. Let's have a look. I've been aware of Tim Christensen's work for many years, and he almost sort of harkens back to that time in Greek pottery where there was a really strong tradition of two colors and figures in sort of everyday life. But I think that Tim is really taking this to a more modern and contemporary level, obviously, by almost encrusting an entire surface with details and imagery and a richness of narrative possibility. The particular piece that really is a showstopper as far as I'm concerned is Grace's Island. And it's unfortunate we can't show you a way that this gets deconstructed, but this is a stacked container which is decorated inside and out on every piece. And so it really gives you so many details, leads you to so many narratives that he'd really like you to sort of fill in the details. They are not extensively clear and yet offer many opportunities for interpretation. I've admired Francine Ozereko's work for many years, mostly for the splendid sort of whimsicality of it, but I think that she also wants us to step back and look at the shapes, not just the narrative and the colors and the sort of unusual juxtaposition, a great many times with birds, but also with other figures, but also to see these as compositions with a variety of shapes and colors that engage us. But I think certainly part of it is narrative. It is asking us to think like, well, what is going on here? Why are birds getting in boats when they can certainly fly? Marilyn Andrews' works have always intrigued me because she made a real commitment, I think, early on in her career to giving us parts of stories or bits of information or suggestions about what might be going on, and yet she always insisted on putting them on a useful object. So there are salt and pepper shakers, there are bowls, there are cups. But I think that part of it is that she wanted the narrative or the hints of a narrative or the story to be present both in everyday, but in an everyday object that acted as a touchstone. Most of Ashley Benton's ceramic pieces involve characters that have either hats or additions to their faces or bodies in order to give us sort of clues about who they might be, who they might want to be, who they wish us to see them as. And so nothing is really exactly clear, and particularly the expressions on these characters' faces don't reveal much to us. We're really meant to understand the slight mystery and perhaps embrace that or not. The small polymer clay sculptures by Rebecca Doughty deliberately engage us on a memory level of childhood brought forward. The bunny heads, bear heads, birdie heads are all wrought to charm, reassure, and remind us of a simpler and, we hope, safer time. I think that they are deceptively charming and simple, and yet could act as almost talismans for a childhood simplicity where hopefully we did feel safer, more happy with the surroundings of the world, and not as challenged as we are. Holly Curcio's figures are stand-ins for our own questions about how we encounter and contend with life. We recognize emotional situations and states of mind that are changed and mitigated by their animal connections. This blending of animal and human can give us both the appearance of perhaps these are the animal states of that person, or something that may give them license to act in a different way because of the animal characteristics they choose to take on. I remain intrigued by the two squirrel figures in Nutcase, because it's so clear that there is a relationship between these two figures, and clearly it has become conflicted or difficult, and yet they're not done with their conversation. These ceramic sculptures by Angela Cunningham are replete with fascinating detail and lustrous textures. The otherworldly forms and surfaces reference places unknown to us, and perhaps only understood on other planets or in the expansive imaginings of the artist. I think the thing that really draws you in is the beauty of the colors and textures of all of these pieces, and yet you can find parts of that that are a little disturbing. There is the notion of being attracted and then repelled, and where does that line exist? And I think it exists for each person individually, but I think that it is something that Angela is drawing attention to. The sculptures created by Ariel Bowman harken back to the 18th century fascination with science and the picturesque. You can see the sorts of beginnings of the age of reason and the analysis of fossils and 18th century engravings that are trying to recreate in a scientific way or imaginative way how these creatures might have existed. She then combines them with either modern objects or decorative objects to sort of create a bit of dissonance about what goes extinct and why, and what choices are made and by which cultures. What are things that get preserved and not preserved? Frank Ozereko's ceramic pieces are a continuation in the long line of pictorial storytelling on ceramic objects, but with the specific intention of asking the viewer to imagine the story rather than telling the tale. Frank is such a splendid draftsman that we decided to include a two-dimensional piece, a two-dimensional drawing, along with his three-dimensional ceramic pieces to show how he is able to convert those extraordinary skills in 2 dimensions onto these amazing objects that are filled with detail. Bruce Barry's work presents a very direct view of a ceramic narrative. I've known Bruce as an artist and teacher for many years and been familiar with his work. The pieces in this show are a continuation of his work where he actually creates journal entries, his personal journals, as the surface decoration on these beautifully wheel-thrown and then molded and sculpted objects. He literally tells the tale. It is his letter to the world, in fact. And so the owner or viewer of these pieces actually receives a journal from Bruce. The highly detailed surfaces of Jeanée Redmond's ceramic works provide more than ample opportunity for reflection and interpretation. The collaged images draw from classical mythology, contemporary design, and her own deeply personal imagery and memories. The surfaces are really covered with so many indicators that we want to interpret and read into. The sort of crowning glory is this container called Greek pots, where every pot is telling a different story, much like Greek pots did in ancient times. Kathleen O'Hara has created her pilgrim flasks as an amalgam of ancient object and current artifact. The original thought behind these was that pilgrim flasks contained holy water or earth or oil that was associated with the sacred site. And so pilgrims would wear these both as an amulet to protect themselves and as a souvenir of their pilgrimage. These objects are also speaking to the notion of current migrations of threatened populations who feel that they must seek succor or salvation in another land. They are forced out of their original homes. And so these pilgrim flasks are also about the migration of threatened populations. And the decorations on the exterior are created by the soles of shoes. And that also references the need to travel, both for ancient pilgrims and modern migrants. When we first encounter Lulu Fichter's work, the highly detailed hand-wrought features of them lead us first to believe they are the remains of creatures long gone, the hard or shell-like forms of animals that once inhabited the earth. They are, in fact, the product of her own imagination and her incredible attention to detail and extreme skill in creating these repetitive forms. She has a real fascination with the kind of repetition that occurs in nature or even in industry. Some of her more recent work, she takes the clean white porcelain form and buries it in river mud near her home, and then uncovers it months later, and it has a new relationship with nature and an entirely new appearance. Upon first encountering Andrea Scofield Olmstead's piece, Ascendancy, it is difficult to ignore the strong connections to the beginnings of Baroque sculpture. The actively twisting forms and powerful emotions expressed by the subjects of the piece feel right at home with the unrest of the sculptures of Bernini and later artists of that period. This is a contemporary work, and yet the motion, the sense of motion and emotion that are invoked by the twisting and turning and clasping really bring the decisions and the difficulties to mind of the figures that are involved. The figures that Claudia Olds Goldie creates in her ceramic work are always fraught with decision-making. There are hints at conflict and choices about to be made or having already been made. They are sort of fluid in the decision process, and we can enter into the same sorts of conflict, the same sorts of decisions, but they're not clear, at least not to me, if the final decision is made or if they are still in the middle. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you're able to come and visit us during the run of the show to see these remarkable objects in person.